Hi, my name's Connor. I teach as a mentor in GDS 6 and I teach the Introduction to Design for Virtual Reality elective in first semester. I'm making this video to encourage the games design students to consider 3D printing, and in particular to consider selling STL files, the digital files for 3D printing online, because you can make a good career out of that. Many of you are probably anxious about how you're going to work when you leave college. Many companies are not hiring. It's difficult to travel. The economy is shrinking generally, so it would be nice to find a way where you can earn money working from home without being dependent on an employer. And selling digital files to people with 3D printers is a very good way to do it. Blythe Thompson is a student who graduated from the games degree at RMIT a few years ago. And so I've recorded an interview with her talking about her experience selling STL files for 3D printing on Kickstarter and Patreon. So I'll show you the interview now, and then I'll tell you about how much money you can make selling these files online. Hello, Blythe.
Hey, Connor.
Good to talk to you. What did you study at RMIT, and when did you graduate?
I did a bachelor's of game design and I graduated, too old to remember now, at the end of 2017, I think.
That's not very long ago.
It's been so long, I can't remember.
What printer did you get first?
My first printer was a Flashforge Creator Pro with like the dual filament spools and everything, which gave me a really good fundamental of like how 3D printing works
Was it
and
good?
learning to print on my own. But then I recently upgraded to an SLA printer instead. I got the Creality 3D, so I can really get the details in my miniatures now, which I couldn't really get with FDM printing.
So FDM is the old version was a filament printer, but the new one is resin.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. How do you find the smell of the resin printer?
Well, I've got water washable resin, and so far it's not so bad. I can smell it, but as long as I keep my window open, it's fine.
Okay.
Uh, it's like it doesn't kill me when I'm sleeping. The FDM was pretty bad because I was in an apartment. So even with all the windows open, it was pretty smelly with the ABS filament.
Oh yeah.
But
ABS
so far
is
the resin is fine.
ABS is worse than PLA.
Yes, PLA is plant-based.
Right. What software do you use for sculpting your minis?
I primarily use ZBrush for everything. It's got, well, obviously you use it for high poly detailed sculpting, but it has really good low poly hard surface tools. Big learning curve, but once you start to get the interface, it really starts coming together.
So you even do all the preparation, like the boolean at the end and the bases and everything's in ZBrush. Is that right?
Yes, I do everything in ZBrush. The only thing I do outside of ZBrush is rendering, where I started using KeyShot to try and get some more realistic looking renders.
For
But I'm
for
still learning.
Is that for promoting them on Kickstarter and
Yes,
Patreon?
because
Yeah.
I didn't have my new resin printer until just a couple weeks ago. So you got to try and make realistic, or at least as detailed looking prints or renders as you can,
Yeah.
so that the patrons can see what they're going to get. They can see the details in the model. They can see for themselves what it's going to look like if you can't show an actual printed version.
Do you need to have a printer to sell STL files?
I don't think you need to have a printer, but you should have a way of testing your prints to make sure they're viable before you sell them to customers.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of my prints, a lot of my STLs, I did not test print, but that was at the point where I knew what I was doing. Whereas at the beginning, I had all of my models test printed to make sure they were all viable and I could figure out what worked, what didn't work, what I was doing wrong, how to fix all of my problems, a lot of which I still have, but I know how to fix them now.
Um, Tell us about your first Kickstarter campaign.
My first Kickstarter was a roller coaster because I didn't think it was going to work. It was a Hail Mary at the end of my visa before I was moving to a new country. and I just had a bunch of part-time jobs. I was just barely scraping by, and the Kickstarter was just a Hail Mary to try and get some extra cash for moving. And but I also saw it as kind of a chance to learn ZBrush more, to make some models for my portfolio. But then I launched it, and it was fully funded within 2 hours. So that was kind of a surprise, and then it just kept going.
How did you get funded in 2 hours? How did you promote it? Did Kickstarter do that for you?
Not in the first 2 hours. So that happened because I gave away one of my models for free I went on Facebook to all the 3D printing groups, and I offered everyone a free model from my set if they joined my newsletter that I made with a MailChimp. So when I launched the project, I emailed everyone on that newsletter, and they're the ones who funded it within 2 hours. And then by the end of the Kickstarter, about 75% of all of my backers had actually come from Kickstarter itself. So they have a really good built-in marketing platform.
So there's a big community of people that just come to Kickstarters to buy stuff that you don't even have to market to them.
Yeah, just to browse. Kickstarter is really good at promoting your work if you tag it correctly. So mine shows up in tabletop gaming mostly. Right. So that's where a lot of people found my project was in tabletop games. And then newest, and then because they got funded so quickly, it was listed in the popular stream. So that got it more exposure.
Oh, Kickstarter featured it, did they?
Not on the page, but it was shown in kind of the what's hot, what's popular now section.
Did you do anything different on the second campaign? Any lessons you learned from the first one that made you do things differently?
Did I do differently? With the first one, it just it all blew up, so I was completely unprepared. So by the end of it, I was just throwing stretch goals in and just making things up as I went along.
Oh, right, yeah, I meant to ask about stretch goals. So you had to add stretch goals in the first one because you weren't prepared for the demand, is that right?
Yeah, and just leave them hanging with just the main set. I could have, but there was so many people who were just piling on, and they all loved it, and they were all sending me messages saying, is there going to be more? Is there going to be stretch goals? And the numbers just kept going up. So by the end, I was just making up names and throwing it up there. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but here's a new name. I'll make a model to go with it. And they kept backing it, even though they hadn't seen the new models that I hadn't even started yet.
So there's a big demand.
Yes, there was a big demand.
And actually, you used the Kickstarter to do some commissions too. How much did you charge for a commission piece?
My base commission was $300, I think. I think on the first Kickstarter, I think my lowest commission was $250, and then I did $300 and $350. I think.
So early backers could get in at $250, but then everybody else paid $350. Is this US dollars?
So I only had one. So there was only one or two available at $250, and then the next tier was only one or two. So it was limited.
Those are US dollar prices, right?
Yes. Everything I've done in US dollars.
Okay. So how do you promote? You've got a MailChimp mailing list, but you also have an Instagram and a Facebook page, isn't that right? And a Discord.
So with MailChimp originally, I actually don't use it anymore because I have a better system now. So most of my advertising is done on Facebook, in Facebook groups. I do have an Instagram that I do get some engagement on. It's grown quite a bit with this campaign, not so much with the last one. Twitter, I don't get a lot of traction on Twitter. Twitter's hit or miss. Twitter's a cesspool of hit or miss.
Yep.
So it's mostly the Facebook groups, going to the groups. But I also created my own Facebook group specifically for my models and my own Discord channel. And in both groups, I can market directly to people who want to be there to follow my models specifically. But then in my delivery of the models, there's a lot of options, but I've opted to use Gumroad to my advantage because when someone downloads a product from your shop, whether it be their campaign set for $0 from the store, or they buy something from me, they're automatically added to a list on my Gumroad, and then I can email them all. So they're automatically added to my Gumroad.
So it's It's really good to be able to track previous customers to bring them back
Yes.
again. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So everyone, even if they download something for free from my shop, they're added to my mailing list through Gumroad. So I now have a mailing list of about 1,500 people.
Right. I was going to ask, do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into sculpting? But I suppose using a storefront like Kickstarter and Gumroad are the first things to do, because you get a record of all your customers, right?
Yes, yes, definitely. So Kickstarter's amazing because you can communicate directly with all your customers. You can message them directly. You can see their pledge info. So if anyone ever messages me with issues about their Kickstarter or questions about their commercial backing, or if I find someone selling my prints but I don't know if they bought a commercial license, I can
Oh,
just
yeah.
say, "Can you just show me your Kickstarter pledge?" And I just use that as proof that they have a license.
So commercial, if someone buys a commercial license on Kickstarter, they're allowed to print the models and sell those, right?
Yes, and I just do a flat, it's a lifetime license, pay the one fee, because I don't have the energy to chase people around forever.
Yeah.
And they
So this,
probably don't have the energy to keep up with dozens and dozens of sellers, of makers that they buy from to sell for.
so this
So,
community is pretty good about piracy. People pay for commercial licenses. They don't just pirate your figures.
so far, yes, and it's really good because I've actually had people messaging me saying, "Hey, I found your models on this other site. Someone's selling the STLs."
Right.
So people have been good about telling me. They let me know directly if they find my STLs being sold somewhere.
Yeah. And so now you're moving to Patreon, is that right? You've started a new Patreon.
Yes, August is my official first month on Patreon, and people from Kickstarter and people who just found me since Kickstarter and bought my models, they've all jumped on board. A lot of them so far have jumped on board my Patreon.
So
So
this
it's
is
the
your
first
job now.
month.
You don't have a development job, do you?
No, I'm doing this full time.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
It's pretty overwhelming.
Okay. So what are your plans for the future? Are you going to do a Halloween set?
I was thinking about it, but then I didn't think I'd have enough time to create the set, run the campaign, wait the 2 weeks after the Kickstarter ends, and then let people have time to print the models.
Yeah.
So I decided instead of doing a Kickstarter campaign, I'll just do a Patreon set in September because I deliver my Patreon models at the end of the month. So that way, if I do it next month, then they get it at the end of September. They have all of October to print and get ready for Halloween Day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Okay. So that was Blythe's interview. Let's take a look at Kickstarter and see what sort of money you can expect from selling STL files online. This is the Beautiful Creatures Kickstarter, which Blythe just completed recently. It made $10,000 US, which is about 14,000 Australian, and it was for a set of animals. Let's go to the campaign. So it's STL files of various animals, and usually I have a couple of poses. These were designed to be printed at 32mm scale, so that's about this size, compatible with Dungeons and Dragons figures. Her previous Kickstarter was for pinups, Gothic pinups, and it made $16,000 US, which is about 22,000 Australian. Here you can see the renders of all the figures and the stretch goals, which Blythe added when the campaign started making a lot of money. So if you're in any way competent with Blender or ZBrush, you can start doing this. You don't even need a printer. You can just start selling files. You might feel that you don't have the skills to sculpt a realistic character, but maybe you can do scenery or figures for board games or something like that. A few years ago I did a Kickstarter for a chess set. So this is targeting fans of a rather obscure chess set called the Dubrovnik chess set, which was available in the 1950s for a special tournament. And so I'm targeting chess fans who are also interested in the Dubrovnik set, who have a FDM printer that can print wood filaments. So it's a pretty niche audience. And this had 74 backers. It made $1,200. So This is probably the lowest you can expect from a 3D printing Kickstarter. Even with a very small focused audience, you will at least make $1,000 easily. If you're able to sculpt terrain or buildings, there's a huge demand for that. So there's a lot of people who have a 3D printer and they play Dungeons and Dragons or they play war games, but they have no art skills. They have no ability to create content for their printer, and so they're desperate for cool content that they can bring to their game sessions, paint up, and show off to their friends. This example, Hexton Hills, which is a hex-based tile system for a campaign map, this made 134,000 euros, which is about $200,000. It just finished up now. So this shows you the scale of the demand. Resin printers have recently dropped in price. They used to be thousands of dollars, but they've recently dropped to the range of $300 to $500. So people spend that much money on miniatures and board games. It's approaching impulse buy price where they can just buy a printer. So there, like I said, there's a huge demand. Let's take a look at a large Kickstarter. This is the Amazon set from Artisan Guild, and this made 139,000 euros just last year. And in fact, the team that makes this went on to start a Patreon. This is their Patreon. So if you're in early, if you're in the first 100, you could subscribe for $9. Everybody else pays $10, and if you pay $29, you get a commercial tier, which lets you sell the miniatures. But they lock that to only a few people, so those tiers are unavailable now. They have 6,700 patrons, so they're making about $150,000 a month from selling miniatures. So I hope this gives you an idea of the scale of the market and how easy it is to get into. If you have questions about this, I'll be on the Discord, and I'll post a link to Blythe's Discord so you can talk to her if you'd like to ask her about how to set up a Kickstarter or a Patreon. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.